iftar, and panel. That's fine. My name is Dean Nasruddin, and I'm one of the curators here at the Arab American National Museum, the first and only museum of its kind in the country devoted to documenting and preserving the Arab American experience. It's a privilege to share this exhibition with you, and I can't think of a more appropriate show for our 20th anniversary season. We've been here for 20 years. 20 years is a long time, and we couldn't have accomplished half of the work that we do without the support of our museum members. Sign up for membership and you'll get so many perks. Access to the museum exhibits, discounts on programs, discounts in the store where it really counts. Access to our library, which by the way has the largest collection of books about or by Arab Americans in the country. And you can check those out if you're a member. Plus, you get free admission to our other Smithsonian affiliates in DC across the country. So think about membership, sign up to be a member, help support us. And you get to hang out with us when you're at programs and stuff, which is like honestly worth it for me. Before I introduce our lovely moderator and panel, I'd like to ground us with an acknowledgement. The Arab American National Museum is housed on the ancestral land of the Anishinaabe peoples. We respectfully recognize the Three Fires Confederacy, Kickapoo, Miami, and Wyandot nations who have stewarded this land throughout the generations, the land that we call home and on which we create art. We acknowledge that we are on occupied land, forcibly taken from its original custodians, and we affirm that while we cannot change history, we can commit to working towards justice, and justice means recognition, acknowledgement, and unwavering allyship. Thank you. As we reflect on land and the histories of those who have come before us, we remember our own homelands and histories. We talk a lot about place and story at the museum, what it means to make a place for yourself in a city, a region, a country that is not made for you. Many of us in this room are familiar with the feeling of starting over, with building what you can right where you are. Sometimes people ask my colleagues and I, why Dearborn? And it's a fair question. Dearborn has the highest concentration of Arab Americans in the country. The museum is here because Arabs are here. We were here when the first horseless carriage drove down Woodward Avenue. Here, working on assembly lines at automotive factories, standing in solidarity against strikebreakers, fighting for fair wages. Dearborn history is Arab American history. It's why Access, our parent organization with deep roots in the Southend, chose to build right here on Michigan Avenue. Seeing the Southend highlights a body of work from the photographer Tony Maine, who we're lucky to have joining us in the audience tonight. Yeah, give it up for Tony for real. Tony was born and raised in the Southend community in Dearborn. He began documenting the growing Arab American community in the 1970s and 80s at the suggestion of fellow photographer and historian Jonathan Friedlander. The pictures are intimate and ordinary, and although they're roughly 40 years old, many of them feel like they could have been taken yesterday. At a time when Americans were overwhelmed with crude stereotypes about the Arab region and its peoples, Tony's lens bore witness to the tender, mundane, and true lived experiences of Arab Americans in Dearborn. The exhibit feels like flipping through a photo album for a whole community. In fact, it's the first time many of these photos will be seen by the public. How lucky are we to be able to offer this to you, Dearborn, our neighbors? We hope you're able to see yourselves in Tony's work, perhaps even recognize someone you know personally, and I'd love to hear it. It has been a joy and a privilege to curate this show. I cannot thank the curatorial team and the rest of my museum colleagues enough for their insight and their support. A special thanks as well to ImageWorks for printing these photos so beautifully right here in Dearborn across the street on Michigan Avenue, which is great. And thanks especially to Tony for bearing witness and preserving this pivotal time in our community's history. Now, I'm honored to introduce you all to our moderator for this evening, Rasha Almulaiki. Hell yeah. Rasha is the founder and principal of Adallah PR Agency, a boutique public relations firm based in Detroit. With a background as a movement journalist, her work has been featured in outlets such as the Michigan Chronicle, Metro Times Detroit, and the Arab American News. Rasha is dedicated to elevating narratives that intersect with community politics, race, gender, and culture. Her expertise spans strategic storytelling, advocacy communications, and media relations, amplifying voices in social justice and grassroots organizing. As a poet and essayist, she explores themes of grief, relational purpose, and righting the roads not taken. Thank you so much for being here with us, Rasha.
Hello, hello. Okay, this does work. Assalamu alaikum, everybody. How are you doing tonight? And Sahtain, what an amazing dinner, right? Sheba restaurant catered right here in Dearborn, a Yemeni restaurant. But we're really here to talk about the Southend, right? Or Salina, or Dix, as we lovingly call it, not just the Southend. And I, although did not grow up in the Southend, I'm an East Sider. I have a lot of ties to the Southend, and I think a lot of us here do too. It's part of the larger Dearborn community. I went to Arabic school there. I had friends and family there. I remember my family's OBGYN, Dr. Malih. Anybody else was born and delivered by Dr. Malih in the Southend? She delivered us all. And getting my favorite slice of pizza as a kid from Mr. Cheese at Dollar Slice. Sitting on the corner stoop watching the men sell their wares in front of the masjid, which was also our family's masjid. And even till today, I hold a very strong connection to the Southend. My father is buried at Woodlawn Cemetery. And so I often go there, if not for business, for something very personal, to go and visit and remember and reflect. And that's actually what brings us here tonight, right? We're here to reflect on times past, the 70s and the 80s, and how radically different, but also the sameness that brings us here today. And so with that, I'd like to introduce our panel to begin our discussion. And begin by introducing to my immediate left is Houwyda Fawaz-Anouti. Please hold your applause until the end. I'm going to introduce everybody at once. I know everybody's great on their own, but we really want to get to the meat of things, right? She is dedicated over 4 decades to social services at Access, where she pioneered food distribution programs and now leads strategic initiatives as Director of Social Services. Sitting next to her is Eman Ali-Ahmed, who many of us know as the beloved principal of Salina Intermediate School and a community activist. She's been serving as a community leader and serving on multiple boards, leading the nonprofit UHF Relief to support education and humanitarian aid. Next to her is Ali Baleed Almaklani, a longtime advocate and a leader in the Arab American community, co-founding YABA and Access, while also serving as a celebrated poet and executive director of YABA, which is the Yemeni American Benevolent Association. And last but not least is who I have come to know as the son of the Southend, Joseph Borrajo, who is a lifelong activist, archivist, historian, and a co-founder of the Arab American Voter Registration and Education Committee. He's also worked extensively to promote civic engagement and preserve local history. And so now this is your cue. A round of applause for our lovely panel. And so I would like us to start off with a question for everybody. What do you feel like these photos have revealed about the lives of the Yemeni and the Lebanese Americans who were in the Southend? And if you could start, I think, immediately to my left with Houwyda. And before you start, tell us, what is your favorite place in the Southend?
The entire Southend.
The whole thing?
Yeah. There's no actual favorite place. As a child, of course, Lapeer. And I went to Salina School and the playgrounds at Salina School, but definitely Lapeer Park.
Yeah, and so when you looked at these photos, what came to you about that time and what sentiments brought up about the community and back then?
So a lot of the photos I saw were actually, I participated in. I was in there in some capacity or at that event in some capacity. And I was sharing with my colleague, Dr. Diana, who's the director of the Arab American National Museum. I pointed out that first big photo where there was a whole bunch of people sitting and then the beautiful mural that was there. And I said, this is my house right here. And my dad took, because it was a ribbon cutting to commemorate the completion of the mural. And people came from all over the neighborhood. We had some chairs, but they also brought their own chairs. And they decided they were going to make falafel or make this. So my dad moved it to my mom, to our house, and my mom had a fit because he had just finished cleaning the kitchen. But I was there in that audience. And I also pointed out that march that was taking place on Michigan Avenue that was protesting the ongoing oppression of what's happening in the Middle East, but in particular Palestine, and the diversity of the people in those photos. And I said to her, my dad used a staple gun to do 1, 2, 3, and we also marched all the way from the south end, from the field near Access, all the way down on Miller, and all the way down to City Hall. And
That's a hike.
yeah.
Yeah.
And people went out there with their families, with their children, and we all walked for the same cause. So for me, you know, when I see these photos, I was part of that time. I lived in the South End from 1974. I was age 8. I moved out to a different residence in 93, but I still go to the South End every single day because that's where Access headquarters made sure it stayed and never left that neighborhood and expanded its programs to include that neighborhood. So I've never left the South End.
Thank you. And Eman, your favorite place?
My favorite place, as a Salina principal, I would have to say Salina.
Of course. Go Wildcats.
Go Wildcats.
Yeah.
And as a student from attending Salina School from preschool through 6th grade, so many great memories, outstanding memories. The South End is a very special place, and we'll probably go more in detail as as we move along. But just answering your question regarding the exhibit, and as I was walking through the exhibit and looking through the pictures and just hearing some of the conversations of the participants and those who attended, it was really heartwarming, truly. And the memories, and it just brought back so many memories for so many people that are here in attendance. And just hearing their stories really just makes you appreciate it even more. I don't think much has changed. I think the sense of community, the sense of family is still there. I was talking to Ali over here, and I was telling him the coffee houses. I mean, we think the coffee movement is new, but we all know the Qahwa and Dick's, right? On Dick Street. So seeing them come together, bringing people together as a social event, that existed like 50 years ago. So it's nothing new. This whole revolution of the coffee movement is really something that probably started in the South End of Dearborn. And when you look at the nation as a whole, the United States, looking at, as Houwyda mentioned, the protests. They were protesting 50, 60 years ago.
Even as long as there was a need.
As long as there was a need, whether it was civic, with the political, anti-Zionist movement, labor movements, ensuring that they had the rights and better conditions in the factories. They were doing it back then. And people like Joe and Ali over here really paved the way for so many people. They did it with very little language, little education. A lot of them came in as laborers, and they really paved the way for all of us. Like, I wouldn't be here today. I wouldn't be the principal of Salina School if it wasn't for people like the ones, amongst the people that I'm sitting here on stage on the panel. So it really brought back so many memories of just so many things that were happening. And really, they originated in the South End, and it's a pleasure to be born and raised in the South End, work in the South End, and continue to advocate for the South End. As you know, we are an industrial island surrounded by industry, and that didn't matter. We're still outside playing. We made the best out of our childhood. So that sums it up.
Yeah. Amu Ali, what's your favorite place in the South End?
Yeah. Hello. Is it okay? Yes. First of all, Assalamu alaikum. I would like to thank the museum for hosting this event. Thanks to Mr. Tony who took those pictures. Thank you, Rasha. And I'm glad to have this panel that I know. Brother, sister, daughters. When I sit beside Joe Baragua, I feel good because I'm sitting with the son of the South End who born and raised over there. He knows so many things. He documents a lot of things. I remember when I came to Michigan. When I come from home, I went to California. I work with the farmer, a sailor from Seattle, work on the ships. I come to Detroit. I arrive over here at Friday. I stay Saturday and Sunday. Monday, I get hired by Ford Motor Company. They used to pay us $3 an hour.
What year was this? Around what time?
1969. So, remember when I seen this picture, of course it's not old, is we're talking about the 20 years, 80 and 70. I remember a lot of things, how the workers, Arab American, and especially the Yemeni, they come over here as singles, they spend their weekend in the coffee house playing cards. They don't have no cars. They use Baker bus or whatever it takes. They stay at the same home or hotel, cooking for themselves, working, helping each other. And it shows the hard work of those people, how they deal with their job, with their economy, and we should be proud of them because they work hard. So remember, so many things going on over there is much different than right now. Those days, of course, no computers, no iPhone, no smartphone, no nothing. Everything in your leg and hand. When someone come in new, I seen him on Dex Avenue, I took him to the restaurant and I feed him and I ask him, what do you need? Get him the social security, help him working for job. If they don't have job, we send them to California because most worker is a farmer. Farmer worker doesn't need no skills. So we deal with that kind until everything is getting different after they brought their family in the 70s. And I will continue and speak about this if it's possible later on. Thank you.
Thank you, Ali. There was definitely a resourcefulness and a do-it-yourself attitude that I think a lot of immigrant communities can share. Joseph, what is your favorite place in the South End?
I'm not sure if this is on yet.
Share. You want to share your mic?
Okay.
There you go.
Okay, well, thank you. Thank you. My favorite place in the South End was the commercial district called Dix Avenue. It was the convergence of everyone in that neighborhood to do their daily activities, whether it was banking or grocery shopping. And that's the area that was everyone engaged one another. We engaged. And I have to tell you, the actual start of Access began in a small restaurant on Dix Avenue, where some of the brain power in that community would sit and socialize and talk about different problems locally and internationally, especially back home. People would come in off the street and sit with those people with the different problems that they faced in the community in everyday life. And they were always offered advice from strong people, strong-minded people that were well-knowledge about the various parts of living a life in Dearborn or in the South End. So that was the start of Access. That little coffee, that wasn't a coffee house, it was a restaurant actually. That was my favorite area, Dick's, the convergence of the community. And I can say, growing up, living that experience in that community surpassed my formal education on so many levels. I've always loved that community. I continue to love that community. It's endeared me in so many ways. And I always respected everyone in that community. And I have to tell you, it was cited in Ripley's, believe it or not, in the early 1950s as being one of the most unique communities in the world. The beautiful diversity of that community, the cultural differences, the many different churches, mosque, and even at one time in the early 19-teens, a synagogue was located there. So that was a valuable experience. And they were all drawn by the same important point, bettering their lives. They came from all over the world, not only for the good-paying jobs at Ford Motor Company. They left destitute situations in their homeland, ravaged by war and poverty. So this was a safe haven, a sanctuary for a lot of these families that came to the South Dearborn and the surrounding communities, Southwest Detroit, Melvindale, etc. The importance of that collaborative effort. We had a camaraderie never ever seen before. People talk to me today when I talk to them about the friends that I still have going back to when I grew up in the South End in the 40s and 50s and 60s. A lot of these people didn't have that kind of companionship. They were struck by that continuity that still remains that we had when we were young. Some of us meet at coffee clatches, and we call it the South End Coffee Clatch, twice a week. And the age difference in that group may vary from 10 to 30 years. But we all knew everyone, the families, where the families lived. That community was a special part of my life and will always be. Love it dearly, still love it.
Thank you. My next question is for Ali and Joseph. Of course, Eman and Houwyda, if you want to jump in. The South End has a history of activism, the advocacy that we've touched on, either related to environmental issues and hazards or the labor activism and rise-ups. How did the residents organize to advocate for their rights during the time of these photos? What did that look like then?
It was a very interesting exercise. A lot of the new arrivals we got coming from the homelands in the Middle East particularly, the women were not active politically in those homelands. It became a very storied of convincing the men of the household that if their wives were able to get registered to vote and vote, it would double their voice in terms of the political process. And we'd go through this. We culturalized the different groups that would come, and then there would be another war in the Middle East, and another group would come, and we'd go through that same process. We were patient. We understood the dynamic of the cultures they were coming from and the things that dissuaded involvement in the entire family. We worked hard to make sure the wives were just as involved in the political process as the fathers were. So that was a goal, and I think we achieved it, but it wasn't without any hardships, too.
I get it. You know, if you want to talk about this, you need hours and hours. Let's start with the environmental. Ever since Ford Motor Company and Levy established, the South End suffered so many things regarding the air pollution. Because of the smoke, of the ash, a lot of people get sick in the South End, whether it's in the mosque, whether it's in the church, whether it's in the school, whether it's in home. You might clean your window at home or your car, but the second days, you will write your name on the car or on the window because of those pollution that come in. The sludge from levee is not covered. The trucks goes through Dex, Eagle, Wyoming, wherever you name it. That make the community have to take action and fight for their better safety. So I think it start beginning when late Mayor Mike Berry represent the community, and then the second one when Attorney Abdin Jabara also represent the community. After more than 350 houses being demolished, few building under the leader of racist Mayor Hobart. He wants to turn the South End to industrial, but the community fought, and they win. And the pollution is still there, it's a little bit better. We cannot tell for move or levy, but at least reduce the smoke, reduce wherever it happened. You can see it sometime at night. It covered the whole sky, the whole area. So a lot of other group involved in the South End start to help fight for the right of the community. Start with the South End. Of course, the Southeast Dearborn Community Council, Helen Atwell, even Joe Pragua and other, and they were there. And then other organization also, they try to help, include Access and YABA and AMC, American Muslim Society. So the fight is continuing and it will never stop. And if you've seen the difference from those days and these days, you've seen so many different, a lot of new houses, everything good, the park, the trees, the relationship with the Dearborn administration, with the police is much different than it has been before. The mayor wasn't racist only for the black people, even the brown people. Some of our workers, Yemeni, I consider they are black. But thanks God, everything is going under control, and one day we will accomplish whatever we're looking for. Thank you.
Thank you, Ammo. Houwyda, you want to add something?
So I wanted to add something else that Ellen Naiman's in the audience, and I want to acknowledge that his family led the class action lawsuit against and took on the city at a time, especially under the Hubbard administration, which was a racist organization administration. And fortunately, they were also our neighbors, and that's how we got to meet Mrs. and Mr. Amen, and through that, we got to meet Alan and his family, and then through that, his son Sam, which we looked forward to playing with on the weekends. But I recall, I read and learned, and especially through Access, how this family took on the fight to stop the demolition of all these houses, and organized the community and led this lawsuit and won. Now, unfortunately, approximately, and Ellen can correct me, about 400 houses were destroyed by that time and demolished. And when I was growing up in the South End, there was always these vacant lot in between houses. And it's because these were the houses that the city demolished. And they were left behind kind of like gardens and orchards and things like that, fruit trees and things like that. We never understood what that was growing up. And you know, when we went to play at Lapeer and through Access and everything else, we'd stop by and take this apple and this pear and toot, you know, the mulberries and things like that. But homes lived there, used to stand there, and families used to live there. And those were all destroyed until the Amen family, thank you, stop them. But advocacy is ongoing. I think when it was established, you didn't think you were advocating. You just came together as a family, as a community, to say this is wrong. I mean, and then learned later on that's a very fancy word for coming together and stopping bad things from happening, to make sure good things happen. And that's always been the case in the South End. And you grow up in that, and your parents participate in that, and they teach you that you should continue doing that, not as like a formal lesson, but through experiences and expectation.
I wanted to use this opportunity to actually shine a brighter light on Mr. Alan Ayman. Would you please stand up for us?
Rasha, can I add a little bit?
من بعد اليوم.
Because I didn't.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. And can we get an audience mic? I wanted an opportunity to allow him to maybe shed a brighter light on what that experience looked like. You know, fighting for the rights of the South Enders against big industry.
Thank you.
Here, sir. Thank you. First of all, I want to tell you I appreciate this whole presentation, the pictorial essay on the South End, and the presentations that I've heard so far. Very good. And if I had to make any kind of comment about the South End, the lawsuit got to be named Catherine Eman et al. Versus the City of Dearborn et al. My mother was the lead plaintiff in the face of the lawsuit. I happened at the time to be the president of the Southeast Dearborn Community Council. A newly established idea at the time of a 501c3 corporation so that we could bring a class action lawsuit. We were successful in court. The lawsuit was filed in 1971. We got our initial Federal Circuit Court decision in 1973. It was appealed multiple times to the Circuit Court of Appeals in Cincinnati. And ultimately, in 1984, the City of Dearborn appealed the case that we had won, and it was an overwhelming victory, to the United States Supreme Court. And the United States Supreme Court, in 1984, upheld the decision, which meant that the South End would continue to exist. I can't emphasize enough that the program was called Urban Renewal. Many of you are too young to know what urban renewal was back in those days. And I assure you it was urban removal. The community had changed multiple times. The Arab community in the South End is part of a cycle of ethnic groups that have cycled through. The South End has been a place for acculturation, assimilation, understanding, and commitment that immigrants could live, learn, enjoy, and become part of this country. It was when the community became predominantly Arab that the city administration, led by one of the most flamboyant racists in the country, an avowed segregationist, I'm not saying anything about him, I'm repeating what he said about himself, decided, and I think I related this to Eman earlier, there was a program in Detroit, the first black talk show in Detroit, Don Haney, and he had Orville Hubbard on his show. And he pressed Orville Hubbard. You got to remember, this man was a dictator. He ran the town. He said, Mayor Hubbard, why are you pursuing this program in the South End when the people are resisting it? They want to stay. And his response was, quote, well, we have to do something with our brown-skinned citizens in the South End, which I say that, I know it's a long introduction to that, but that sums up what was driving this program. It was sold as an economic boost to the city of Dearborn. It was, in fact, a program to remove a community that was deemed undesirable. The amazing thing today, as I think everybody will agree, is that community not only survived, it has prospered and grown and become one of the most amazing success stories, economically, politically, socially, academically, professionally, in the country, ever. And not because it was an Arab community, because before that it was the Southend that they referred to. A feeling that people shared a common history, a geographic connection that really bordered on being like a blood relationship. People of various ethnic groups. It transcended ethnic groups, religion, national origin. The people we grew up with and lived with were almost any ethnic group you could name had representatives in the South End. But we were one big family. Always have been, still are. We actually had a reunion after many years. People came from literally all over the world, Europe, Asia, the Middle East, to attend this reunion that was held at the local 600, as I know some of us old-timers remember, shoulder to shoulder, that people came back because the connection to the South End had stayed with them, like Joe said, and will never leave. What a great community.
Thank you, Alan. We thank you and your family for putting yourselves on the front lines, making sure that generations are still here today. And it's actually just that I would like us to close out the panel with taking 1 minute each to let us know what message would you give to younger generations in the South End. And Joseph, we'll start with you.
I would suggest to the younger generation that, first of all, and we've got an issue in the community right now, that a lot of our youth think that history begins when they're born. They forget their mother, father, their grandparents, their great-grandparents. They got to get in tune to the fact that they have to be aware of the beautiful community they come from. I would suggest they tune into that community, understand that community. And after a while, I'd like to expound on some of the things that happened within that community, outside that community, that were really detrimental, and how the school board, the entire school board, the city of Dearborn, include the superintendent, board of education, principals, counselors, and teachers. They looked at that community in South Dearborn, in their words, it was culturally deprived. It absolutely blew my mind when I stood and realized the rich diversity of cultures that came into that community. How could we be culturally deprived? It was diminishing of a community that was very rich and come from cultures that are 100 years in the making, thousands of years in the making, when this nation, as a nation, was less than 200 years old. So that had to be an issue that be addressed. And I never let the people forget it that were responsible for it, about it.
We need to remember where we came from, absolutely. Amo?
Yeah. Before I answer that question, I want to mention, because the first question took two things, the environmental and then the movement of the workers. The workers start to organize themselves. Why a lot of people come to the South End because of Ford Motor Company. And one time Ford Motor Company talked to one of the sailors from Yemen, tell them about what they're doing, and if they can come and work with Ford, he will pay them like $5 a day. So they start movement. I'm talking about the Yemeni American community. In 1973, they made two rally, and one support the farmer workers in California. Which one of the Yemeni workers get killed by security guard over there? when the United Farmer are fighting for their right, led by Shafis. The second one, when the October war in the Middle East, all the Yemeni workers, they signed their check and give it to the victim of the Middle East. We gather $1,000. We send it with the former Yaba president, the late Ali Saleh. He went to Syria. And then when they gather against the woodcock, when they try to honor him because of the Israeli man, at that day, the main dog, Chrysler, shut down because 2,000 workers, most of them from the Yemeni workers, walk out. So that's show you how strong. When community work together, when you have a cause, when you believe that you cannot win if you stay home, you cannot win if you're scared, you cannot win if you're afraid. We come over here as immigrant. You know, one time, a lady is coming from overseas, she delivered at the sky. And all those sky that the country she fly over, they grant that children citizenship. Well, right now, they are talking, if you born over here and your father and mother is not citizen, you cannot be citizen. What a justice, what a freedom, what a democratic country. So I hope my message to our new generation, you are lucky, better than your father and mother and those who live in the earlier. They have rough time, you have everything with you. That time when someone come over here, he is taking care of himself, the family back home. Then he brought the family over here and you have big responsibility, but you have the chance to study, to change. And one thing, if you don't know where you come from, I don't think you know where you're going. So take
That's right.
whatever is good from your parent, from those old, and if something, you know, is whatever is positive or negative, you are the one who will change. And I'm glad to see all this new generation. I think I've seen our congresswoman over here, Rashida Tlaib. Thank you so much for coming. So thank you.
She's with us in spirit.
Okay, very good.
Thanks. She's here? No. Oh, that one looked like her. Yeah, I swear.
Show yourself. All right, thank you, Ammo Eman. Thank you.
Thank you.
So that's a great question, actually, because one message that I give my 8th graders, our school currently goes up to 8th
You're
grade.
surrounded by younger generations.
Yeah, and one thing that I tell them is how lucky they are to live in such a beautiful community, such a diverse and a community that has so much history, truly. And I always say we graduate about 100 students a year, and I really want to see them to do advocacy, because they don't realize their parents, their grandparents, their great-grandparents, how hard they worked to get where they are today, right? So I feel like they can do more. You know, now we have people like, or individuals like Samra Lukman, who understands what's coming out of the pollution. So it's not just the pollution, but what's coming out, specific, the chemicals, and doing advocacy in regards to that. So I wished that they can really understand their history, be proud of their heritage. I do have a sign in my office that says, those who deny their heritage have no heritage. So no matter where you come from, whether you're Polish, Romanian, Italian, Lebanese, Palestinian, Syrian, Yemeni, whatever it is, black, white, however you identify, I feel like be proud. Just be proud of where you came from, be proud of your roots, and continue to tell the story to the following generation. And And then just really, like I said, I mean, for those who don't know the South End, we are surrounded by industry. We have Levy in the east side. We have, the steel mills, Ford Motor Company on the west. Down Wyoming on the north side, we have the scrap yards. We have, the trucking companies. And on the far south, we have the Marathon refineries. So literally surrounded by industry, industrial island, but we can do more. I think right now the big focus is, we know the impact of the corporations and the companies that bring jobs to our community, correct? And help the economy. But we just want them at the end of the day to be good neighbors and at the same time have that respectful approach to things. And at the end of the day, everyone lives and just be proud. Be proud, and at the end of the day, be a proud Southander, be a proud Wildcat, and be a good citizen of the world.
Thank you. That was very grounding and a community call to action. Houwyda, bring us home.
So I want to tell the young folks to please drive carefully. And quite frankly, drive and be as safe as possible. Having said that, I think what's also important to remember.
I do bring in Chief Asa Shaheen every year, so
That's
he can relay the message. I'm like, please tell them about not speeding, and so he kind of sends a strong message, because the very next year, as freshmen, I see them driving around. I'm like, you already have your permit?
Yeah.
I'm like, hey, Miss Ahmed.
Yeah.
So yeah, excellent point.
Excellent
point.
Yeah. So not to make it, it's been honestly a devastating, few years and very fatal. Having said that, I want us to, when you talk about community and growing up in the South End, regardless of who was there, and this is the neighborhood for you, some people that don't understand, and some of people who may, is that I lived in a community where you were more worried about your neighbor seeing you, Mrs. So-and-so or Mr. So-and-so, because they're going to tell your parents if you're not behaving. And that's the community that I'm hoping will be expanded. So everything started for the Arab American community, in the diverse community that we grew up in the South End, but it moved east and west and north and even further. But a sense of community is very important, and everyone working together to make sure that we treat all the youth and the young people as if they're our children, and to be that guiding light, and to be not to be so judgmental, but to make sure that we are a voice of reason and a welcoming environment and a teaching environment. And at the same time, to also learn from them, because learning is always a two-way street. You should, as an educator, I hope you're, because you also want to learn from them. They have a lot to offer. And for them, they have the world stage on their phone, good and bad, but they have that access. And for them to learn from the seniors and to really take it to further, and a lot further than we were able to take it. We had the opportunity and the pleasure and the honor of having the Amens. And I mean, God bless Mr. and Mrs. Amen, our neighbors. They were part of our upbringing. Don Yunus, God bless his soul, who was also a founder of Access and a founder of the Southwest, and founder of just about a lot of other things, who worked all day at the fire department, but would come to Access and make sure if something needed to be done, and to be that mentor. So maybe mentoring and then learning from them. And then I can never and will ever never forget is Mr. Tom Shammy, who's, I hope, still here. I grew up in the South End going to the Access program. So Access has been part of my life for literally 50 years, since 1974. I was a participant, a youth leader, and now a full-time employee. But I always worked with Mr. Shammy, where when we went to Lapeer, he was that person that took care of you and learned who your family was and if you needed anything, and made sure that the kids stay safe and didn't drown. Thank you, Mr. Shammy, because and then worked with the summer youth program. And so it took all these family members and individuals, and today Dearborn is as successful as that because of these incredible and wonderful people. So to the youth, teach us, but also learn from us as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
if I could add to Houwyda, Eman, there's an Arabic word, aib, shame. And it was a behavior modifier in our community. I'm sorry to say, I think on a larger scale through the general American community, it's not there anymore. But
It's like a social policy, right?
yep,
To keep people in line.
absolutely.
Yeah.
And
How to
the point
behave.
that you made earlier,
I means shame.
Shame,
A cultural weighted shame
if you did
in Arabic.
something
What are the neighbors
wrong.
going to say when they see you doing that in the streets?
Yeah,
You know,
if-
so it's like, oh no, you know.
if you did something wrong as an individual, it became a reflection on the entire family.
Honor. It's all
That
about honor.
Honor issue, basically. But the point you make, too, with regard to the whole idea of influencing children as mentors. And one of the things that we talked about, the 70s, 80s portraits provided by the wonderful photographer. The problem prominent then was pollution, air pollution. And it still exists today. But going back to the 40s, 50s, and 60s, before air conditioning was introduced as a fundamental part of a residential residence, when they had air conditioning, people could close their windows, close their doors, and get away from that pollution. They didn't have that in the 40s, early 20s, 30s, 40s. And another interesting thing to point, a lot of your heavy industry and all the industries that we have surrounding us, you'll find that in major communities that were low on the social economic station. These heavy industries were always surrounding those communities, not the wealthy communities, not the wealthy communities. And the realization now is the detriment that it plays with regard to the general health of our community. And there were a number of families that I personally knew that suffered from asthmatic conditions that had to move out of the South End. So this is a price to pay for living in the South End that can be improved on, and we need to improve on it. And you can only do that from community activism, social, political activism, some of the things we saw in terms of lawsuits in the community. And there was a lawsuit in the early 2000s that was started by a gentleman in Melvindale and carried on with a group in South Dearborn. Myself was included in that sued the oil refinery and Rouge Steel for the pollution. There was a big reward handed out monetarily. That's something I wasn't really interested in. But what did result in was them putting in new filtration systems, scrubbers in the stacks that reduced the amount of pollutants that came into the community. There was a beautiful system installed by the county level, an air monitoring system just north of Salina School, just before Lapeer Road, that monitored that system, the air, the quality of air. But when we had a setback, there was a limitation in terms of parts per million. It was set back when new government in the state government and the powers of the Koch brothers got those limitations actually elevated, which meant there was more contaminants in the atmosphere that we had to contend with. So it's a never-ending fight, never-ending fight. We got to fight for the quality of the air that we breathe, the water we drink, and the food that we eat. And that's the only way we can settle it. It was oh my gosh. Martin Luther King said, the oppressor never gives up on, gives way to being freely giving up the things that the oppressed have to suffer through. It's up to the oppressed to make demands on the oppressors to achieve those goals. And I stand by Martin Luther King on so many things he did, wonderful things.
Thank you, Joseph. So I know that we can keep talking all the live long night. There's so many layers, so many pieces to just keep holding back. But alas, we are towards the end of our time. And so I would like us to take one burning question from the audience. Does anybody have one? Well, to ask our lovely panel here. James?
Hey guys, thanks for the conversation tonight. Hey, thanks for the conversation tonight. I was wondering, it sounds like Orville Hubbard was trying to acknowledge where things were heading by saying, if the South End's going to be industry, then we don't want people living here. Why not just let that happen if there's all these issues with pollutants to this day?
The dislocation of a population, it's been established by long-term decisions. Even it started with the Geneva Conventions, what resulted with regard to what Nazi Germany did with displacing large population centers. It's against the international law to do so. And it applies to the U.S. Constitution itself with regard to our rights as citizens of this country, not to be displaced, dislocated on some of these things that we talked about and Alan talked about with regard to urban renewal. That was nothing more than a screen for clearing out a population they didn't want to have existed. I have to tell you an interesting story. This is from a story from East Dearborn. And I talked to the financial manager of the city hall at the time. There was a situation on Warren Avenue, commercial district, the residential area of Tireman. Tireman bordered the city of Detroit. At the time, there was a white flight situation that happened there. The Arab Muslim community not caring about that issue, moved in there, bought those homes, stabilized that whole residential corridor. They also stabilized a blighted commercial district on Warren Avenue by investing their money into that community. When I talked to the financial advisor at the city hall, he said, you know, when something like that happens in a particular part of the community, the entire community, West Dearborn, the upscale West Dearborn benefits from it too because the housing values go up. So I always pushed home that point. Whatever happens in the South End, and it's not good, it's not a good picture, it becomes a reflection on your home values in West Dearborn. So you had, in West Dearborn, had better take an interest in benefiting that community in the South End because you receive benefits from it.
Yeah, I guess I just can't help but to add, because that was a good point, really. Why not industrialize an already polluted area rather than clean it up? The point is, though, who pays for it? You totally eradicate a functioning, vibrant community of people who were considered underprivileged. We were culturally deprived, and we were the happiest people in the city. But it would have been done to benefit the white population. And isn't that a standard that this country's operated on for a long time, where I'm sorry, but people of wealth and privilege get benefits that are paid for off the blood and sweat of the underprivileged. Very often those communities, after the years, when they're settled in the worst part of town, it's discovered that that's a very valuable part of town. So they snatch it back. In the city of Dearborn, they used federal money, which required by law for them to relocate the people within the same city. And the portion of the money had to be set aside to do that. Dearborn spent not one dime on relocation. It was removal. They were paid 25 and 30 cents on the dollar, the value of their house, so the people would be pushed out of town. And I can't help this, isn't it kind of similar to what's happening to the Palestinians right now on their land?
That's absolutely right. Thank you.
Here speaking, oh, I'm sorry. I also want to talk, since you mentioned urban renewal, we also have communities in the Detroit area that were effectively removed by urban renewal, like Black Bottom and Paradise Valley, which were like black power, like centers of black power, black economic power. And so I don't know the exact lineage of like the Arab economic power, but I have a feeling that the South End economic power, had they eradicated it to the level that they wanted to, we would not have Dearborn be what it is today. Because that momentum that we could have, and it sucks because we have an example through Black Bottom and Paradise Valley of what could have been. And like it's a real speculative fantasy that we can think about and we can also track economically and that also frustrated race relations in our community because a lot of black people, according to the Black Bottom Archives, one of our friends at the Black Bottom Archives said a lot of black people in the community felt betrayed by the rise of Arab economic power at the time of the drop of black economic power. Oh, hi, Sally. So this is like something that I think it's a very important question, but that's the cost of staying together. They took away our right to assemble. And this is ongoing, and gentrification is happening as we go, so we all have to stick together with this. Thank you.
I do want to add on a positive note. I know we've come a long way. So many issues that we've had to experience and deal with and advocate for. But now we have such an amazing administration who wants equity in the city, whether you live in West Dearborn, East Dearborn, the south end of Dearborn. Shout out to Mayor Abdullah Hammoud and his administration, who have really organized and really advocated. I mean, at one point, not too long ago, there were talks about removing the pool, the Lapeer pool. I mean, I remember being at the recreation meeting and saying, where do and I'm advocating for the students at Salina, like, where are they supposed to go ride their bikes to the Civic Center or Hemlock or Ford Field? I mean, where are they supposed to go? They can't just easily leave the South End, and many of the moms do not drive. So it took people like Abdullah and his administration, his public health unit to really make change. I mean, right now they're adding new playgrounds across the city, more green spaces. I mean, as a Salina school community, we're also adding more green spaces and, applying for grants. And really, I mean, kids should be outdoors at the end of the day. So, again, shout out to the mayor. And, back then, you can't bite the hand that feeds you. So we saw a lot of that. A lot of the, many of the previous mayors and the government administrations in the past were given X amount of money, and they just were quiet about it and silent. So in addition to the residents, the current mayor is right now finding corporations heavily to clean up and to go more green in their spaces. Like I said, we don't want them to leave. We want them to go more green and invest in their facilities, for the people of the South End.
And to follow regulations, and not to adjust regulations to meet their needs, but to meet the needs of the residents around them.
I'd just like to add, you have a mayor in the city of Dearborn, is very visionary, very forward-thinking, and he particularly spends a lot of time with interests with children. This guy, I'm endeared to him greatly, and I've told him so to his face that I am a soldier for him.
All right, can I get a huge round of applause for our amazing panel? Joseph, Ali, Eman, and Houwyda, and all of you beautiful people for being here today. So our panel portion of the night may be over, but there are going to be tea and refreshments in the courtyard, and one last look at the exhibit, at least for tonight, because the exhibit itself is going to be open through, I think, the rest of April or until April. And so, July, I'm a liar, until July of this year, even better. And with that, thank you so much for being here tonight, and we'll meet you outside in the courtyard.